this month we are talking about triggers. Some may seem obvious when we think of triggers in grief or after the death of a loved one. Triggers like getting an invitation in the mail for a baby shower after you've lost your infant. Maybe it's going to a waiting room and sitting there waiting for an ultrasound after struggling with infertility and seeing all of the pregnant women in that room. Or triggers like going to a grocery store and seeing the food that your child loved to eat after they've passed away. And every time you see that cereal box, it makes you think of them. And the not so obvious triggers that we talk about, like getting in the shower, having a quiet moment alone where the tears flow as fast as the water does. Or being out in public. Sometimes I'll be at one of our child's games or sporting event, and I'll hear called out the name on a speaker, Marshall. Or I'll be at a coffee shop having a conversation with somebody, and somebody will say the name Marshall in passing, and it just kind of catches me for that moment and takes my breath away. Even if it's a good feeling afterwards that I'm glad I'm hearing his name out in public, but there's that second where it just kind of catches me and knocks me off my feet for a moment. Triggers come in all different areas of life. The truth is we get triggered in life that has nothing to do with our grief. Maybe it's opening up the bills every month that releases certain triggers on our relationships with money and spending and material items. Maybe there's triggers when we see a certain number show up on our phone and who's calling or how those people make us feel. Maybe it's triggering in the traffic lights that we hit every day on the way to work or into activities. There are so many different triggering things, and we can't get away from them. So what do we do? How do you work with your triggers? There's all different kinds, as we know, and some of the things that I find helpful, especially when I'm dealing with triggers that relate to my heart or relate to my grief, are simple things like pause. I know it's overused sometimes, but that concept to just take a mental pause and allow yourself to have a breath. Allow yourself to take a minute or just a second, just a few seconds that pause creates. And what that allows is that time for us to think about, before we jump into action, how do we want to respond? Maybe we still don't have the skills in place or the choice in place that we want to manage our actions any differently. But creating that little pause reminds us to breathe and helps us take a step out of that fight, flight, or freeze mechanism that's kicking in from whatever trigger it is. Movement is something that I use. I use my hands a lot, even when I talk. But movement, if I'm feeling really triggered, just now something happened and it was very frustrating for me. Totally unrelated, working on putting this video together, and everywhere I went around the house, somebody was there, neighbors were starting up machines, this thing was going off, the washing machine, all whatever it is. And I was feeling triggered about trying to do these things and not finding a quiet space to be able to do that. So just decided to hop out here and come over to my garden, and had a little chuckle before I sat down because my garden is triggering right now. Every year I plant this little garden in these boxes here, and they don't do great. We're away a lot, we're on the road a lot, but I make sure they're watered and do all of the things and love that process of planting seeds in the spring. And doesn't always turn out the way you plan it. And we're in a lot of shade in this spot, so surrounded by forest on this area, maybe there's all these reasons why. But either way, the gardening was another little trigger coming out. And so just had to laugh and think, okay, what are some of these things that I use? And movement is another one that I was mentioning, where just moving your body. It can be as simple as, touching your fingers or bending them, holding your hands together, shaking it out, whatever movement means to you, whatever kind of movement you like, whether that's running or dancing or jumping or going for a walk or going for a swim, whatever it is, that you can do a little bit of movement to help move the energy of what that trigger is bringing up in you. I invite you to take a moment and think about what ways you find supported to navigate your triggers. And again, the reminder that the goal isn't to avoid all of life's triggers, wouldn't that be great? But to know that when we face them, that we have some things in our grasp that we can use, that you can use to help you get through that moment. Not about pretending the moment doesn't happen, not about pretending that we're having emotions. You are allowed to have an emotional experience. Let your emotions be present. Let them be there. And then not judging those emotions or shaming them, but saying, okay, and now the actions coming out of these emotions are going to be back in my control. That idea of we're taking small steps in the direction of not letting fear be the driver of all of our decisions and actions. A few things to share with you about the community I've been working on this summer and moving some things around. So if you notice some of the content moving or some of the categorization changing, please bear with me as I work through that. What I'm working on putting together for this fall is a specific area for the newly bereaved. So those of you coming into the community who are newly bereaved and looking for some support and some resources in that very new and fresh time, so that it's easier for you to find some of those pieces of information in some of that content. We're also putting together areas of inspiration, some areas of member gifts, more information about the online program, and moving things around so that we make sure that the content that you come there for, the content that you're hoping for, is easily found, and that there's an opportunity for you to engage in it, whether that means you're just in a state of consuming it and reading it and kind of having that quiet reflection on it, or whether you'd like to get more engaged by sharing a like, adding a comment, reaching out in a chat to somebody who posts something that resonates with you, maybe answering a poll and sharing a little bit about yourself in one of those safe and easy ways. There'll be lots more to come about the community as I continue to unroll it. I'm planning on in September and October putting some announcements out through these kind of messages, through the community newsletter, online and Instagram and Facebook. So stay tuned for more updates in that way. If you have any questions, please do reach out. As you are kicking off the fall or taking steps in that direction, I invite you again to think about the season of life that you're in. Whatever that may be, it's always in change, just as the seasons are in nature. I always find that the cool fall weather that comes in and starts to take over the evenings and the early mornings here, it seems to come so quickly. And watching the leaves change their colors is always that reminder of that big transition. And so honoring the seasonal changes that are happening around us, and what does that mean for our life? How is that changing the activities we're in? Maybe that's changing the routes that we drive on. Maybe that's changing our sleep patterns or our eating patterns, the people that we surround ourselves with. And what are some of those changes coming up for you? How can you support yourself through them? Enjoy all of the changes that are coming in nature's hues. And for some of those big transitions that aren't enjoyable and have been really painful and hard, I want you to know that you're not alone, that I'm here for you. And I don't stand alone either. We've got a whole community together and some pretty incredible resources and colleagues out there. Reach out anytime. Take care, friends.